Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Jeff Sachs, of course, from Beit Agnon. It's so nice to see so many of our old friends, who have traveled with us numerous times over the years, and some folks that I know are going to become good new friends who will be traveling with us this year, next month to Provence, and later in the summer to back to Prague, Vienna, and Budapest. Some of you are veterans of the last time we took that trip, and that, of course, is the main topic that brings us together tonight, which I'll get to momentarily. I'm really glad that we have this opportunity. This is something I've been thinking about for years. Ways that, we can meet together, those of us that have traveled together. We have at this point almost 200 people who have traveled with us on the whatever it is, 7 or 8 tours that we've done in English from Beit Agnon, and I'm so always so delighted by the camaraderie, the esprit de corps, the friendships, the really deep, meaningful friendships that are forged from the people that travel together with us. I think that's the thing that I'm most proud of the work that we do together. I know for myself, and particularly for David Bernstein, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight because he's guiding somewhere else at the moment. I think he might be in Poland. um, David, who was with us last time in Prague and will be with us again in Prague, and the other guides that have gone with us to other locations where David doesn't guide. That's what we're most proud of, is the quality of the group and the quality of the relationships that are developed. And I always thought it would be nice, and from time to time, those of us that are in and near Yerushalayim meet, as we did many of us last week at Beit Agnon for an event. But of course, not everybody is able to be with us in Yerushalayim. So it's nice that we can meet on Zoom and continue, what I think is the important thing of our encounters with our traveling is the deep engagement with Jewish life, literature, and learning, with Jewish culture, with Jewish civilization. And so I'm really glad that we're able to do this. I do want to add, on a kind of sad note, we lost our dear friend Michael Sandpearl just a few weeks ago, and I just since we're gathering together in this kind of reunion, I wanted to think of him. He was with us last time in Prague and in Portugal and in Poland. Those of you that were on those trips certainly remember Michael as the consummate English gentleman, and really just the most lovely traveling companion that we can have. He passed away really rather suddenly. He was planning on coming with us to Provence, unfortunately, and his. I just wanted to make mention of that, because when one of the group passes, it leaves an impact and on all of us. But we are here tonight to talk about Terezin, or Theresienstadt, as it's very often known. And those of you that were with us in 2022 on our trip to Prague, Theresienstadt is about 60 kilometers, I think, to the north of Prague. Um, Certainly remember that visit. How can you not? And those of you that will be with us in Prague are in for a very powerful experience. And of course, you see on the screen here the the hidden prayer room, the secret Beit Knesset, this tiny, this room even actually makes it look larger than it is. This little hidden prayer room with the wall paintings and the psukim, and those of you that were with us remember being in there and saying Tehillim together and davening mincha together, and the experience of standing and praying together, where so many unfortunate Jews uh, of 80 some odd years ago had very different experiences and different lives than we have. But of course, people that know about Theresienstadt know that it was a it was a transport camp. It wasn't an extermination camp. It was a concentration camp and a transport camp. Most of the Jews that made their way to Terezin later found their way in in Auschwitz, and of course, we know what happened to the very many that ended up there. But Theresienstadt was something of a show camp, as Alan will describe. So I won't go into it in too great detail, but it had this remarkable and unlikely uh, 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 history in which it became a center of Jewish creativity. And it shows that Jewish creativity can arise in the most unlikely places. And as I've said in the context of our work in Agnon, Jewish creativity is really the most authentic response to the traumas of Jewish history. So Alan, who was with us in in Portugal a few years ago and is actually coming on both trips this year to Provence. And he's just decided to join us in Prague, Vienna, and Budapest, even though he's been to all those cities and has performed in all those cities. He's coming back again. But since I knew of his interest in Terezin and the music that comes out of Terezin, he suggested that he give this talk, both to those of us that will be traveling or have traveled there, as well as the rest of us, to talk about the Jewish music and the Jewish composers who were present in Terezin and his own work in trying to bring about an awareness of that music to the general public so that those unfortunate Jews can receive the recognition for their artistic contributions that otherwise would be lost. I'll just say that Allan, of course, is a very, very accomplished pianist and musician in his own regard. He's performed in chamber music concerts and solo recitals and with orchestras and on the radio, in Israeli music festivals, international music festivals. And for over 30 years, he was on the faculty of the Jerusalem Academy of Music.
41 years, Jeff. 41.
41 years. For 41 years, he was on the faculty of the Jewish Academy of Music. He served there as dean of students, and he served there a number of terms as chairman of the keyboard department. And I've had the privilege. He often invites us through our WhatsApp groups to his performances in and around Yerushalayim. And my wife and I finally made it to one, and it's well worth the price of admission, which is often free. So it's even it's
For that,
even
it's worth it,
it's even
yes.
it's even more worth it. But it's well worth the price of admission to hear him to hear
At
him.
that price, take two, Jeff.
So here we are for a presentation with Allan Sternfield on the music of Terezin. We'll ask people to keep their microphones muted. Feel free to post in the comments, and then at the end we'll open it up to conversation. Take it
Okay.
away, Allan.
Thank you, Jeff. When we consider that in the Shoah, 6 million Jews were murdered, we should not be surprised to discover that among 6 million people, there were a few composers. And we probably should not be surprised to discover that some of those composers were even quite good composers. And today, I'm going to talk to you about a group of composers who were so good, such wonderful musicians, that had it not been for that their fate brought them to Terezin and after that to Auschwitz, no doubt they would already have been well known as major figures in 20th century music. And I'm talking about the composers that were active in the ghetto of Terezin. Terezin is a small town about 60 kilometers north of Prague. During the war in 1941, all the residents of the town were evacuated, and the town became a ghetto where Jews from Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Austria, Germany, Holland, and Denmark were sent, pending their ultimate deportation to the extermination camps in Poland. Around 150,000 Jews passed through the ghetto. 87,000 of them were deported to the death camps, of whom about 3,000 survived. At any given time, there were as many as 40,000 occupants in a town which before the war had a population of about 6,000. In Terezin, there were many artists, musicians, conductors, composers, actors, and authors. I might add at this point that the Czech Jewry was well known for their appreciation of the arts. And in spite of the appalling conditions of overcrowding, hunger, disease, and the worst of all, the constant threat of deportation, there developed a cultural life of incredible richness. Czech and German theater, cabaret in both languages, opera, chamber music, light music, and a very well-known jazz band called the Ghetto Swingers. Parenthetically, I would add when I mentioned that there was the constant threat of deportation, And I will talk about that later. The truth is, I think that at that time they didn't know what Auschwitz was. They didn't know. And it may be that during all the time of Terezin that they really didn't know where they were going. But still, there was a terrible fear of deportations. In their experience, any move had always been for the worst. And there was no reason to suspect that if they were leaving Terezin, as bad as it was there, that they would be going anyplace better. They certainly had reason to believe that they were going someplace worse. And there was a great deal of fear from the deportations. Now, when I talk about the cultural life of incredible richness, I can imagine that some of you are saying to yourselves, oh, yes, of course, Terezin, we know all about it. It was the model camp, and we know, and we've heard, and this, and all that. So that is a rather gross misconception. When Eichmann was asked at his trial to talk about Terezin, he said it wasn't set up as a model camp, not at all. It was set up as a central point that Jews could be sent all over Europe to facilitate sending them off to the death camps in Poland. So that when I talk about the musical activity which began in the winter of 1941, all of this activity was strictly forbidden, and it was all done in secret. It was forbidden to bring musical instruments to the ghetto, and printed music was not available. So at first, if anyone played anything, they were doing it totally by heart, what they remembered. An old piano without legs was found in an attic someplace. It was placed on wooden supports, and so the first concerts took place in the winter of 1941. Later, there were grand pianos of good quality, as well as a large library of sheet music and books taken from Jewish apartments in Prague. Only later, in December of 1942, the Germans officially allowed this musical activity to continue. The attitude seemed to be, well, since we're going to kill them all anyway, so what does it matter if we allow them to have a little fun before we take them off to kill them? And finally, in preparation for the visit of the Red Cross in 1944, the Germans actually encouraged musical activity for propaganda purposes. Now, I want to say a few words about that visit of the Red Cross. I don't know whether people are aware that the Red Cross came to Terezin. In 1943, 466 Danish Jews were sent to Terezin. I think we all know that the bulk of the Jewish community in Denmark was ferried over to Sweden. But anyway, in late 1943, 466 Danish Jews were sent to Terezin, and King Christian X of Denmark demanded a visit of the Red Cross to see how his citizens were being treated. To prepare for the visit, there began a ghetto beautification program that lasted several months. Buildings were painted, pavements were cleaned, a cafe was opened, grass and flowers were planted, and a children's playground was set up. A music pavilion was built. There was more and better food, and 17,500 prisoners whose appearance belied the rosy picture the Germans were trying to paint were quickly sent off to Auschwitz. The long-awaited visit of the Red Cross took place on June the 23rd, 1944, and it was a huge success. The delegates were led on a predetermined route where there were buildings in relatively good condition, inhabited by small families, and they were not allowed to deviate from that route. Not a single Jewish inmate dared to scream out, "Can't you see what a farce this is?" And so, after 6 hours, they left and submitted a rather positive report on the state of the Jews in Terezin. When the Nazis saw how well it had gone, they decided to exploit Terezin for propaganda purposes. There was a film director in Terezin by the name of Kurt Geron, and he was promised that if he would help them to produce a propaganda film, they would let him live. He agreed, and the 90-minute film, of which 20 minutes survive, was completed in 11 days in early September 1944. It was called The Fuhrer Presents the Jews with a City, and in it we see cafes, athletic events, and concerts. One of the composers I'm going to speak about, Pavel Haas, wrote a new piece specially to be performed, to be premiered in the film. And of course, the subtext was that while our brave young men, our brave soldiers are fighting in the war and are living in the dire conditions of battle, and even we civilians in Germany are suffering through the war, the Jews are continuing their idyllic existence with their lives almost undisturbed. As you might guess, the Nazis kept their promise to Geron, as they kept most of their promises, and he was deported to Auschwitz and killed there. As to the film, I do not believe that the Nazis got much benefit from it. By late 1944, I'm not an expert on the history of World War II, but by late 1944, I think it was rather clear to all that the war was not going well for the Germans, and their ultimate defeat was only a matter of time. It took 8 or 9 more months, but I don't think they got a great deal of use out of that propaganda film. Anyway, the picture of cultural events taking place in the ghetto in Terezin presents a rather complex picture. If you speak to survivors from Terezin and say, well, there were concerts there. Did you go to concerts? Some of them will say right away, a concert, I don't know what you're talking about. I never heard of a concert in Terezin. Who ever heard of such a thing? And anyway, even if I had known there was a concert, I would never have gone. The only thing that interested me in Terezin was finding another piece of bread. And on the other hand, there are other survivors who, when asked, did you attend any concerts in Terezin? They said, at every opportunity that I could. And some of them go so far as to say, and I doubt that I could have survived without that spiritual food, because they certainly didn't get very much of the real thing. To go back to the composers in Terezin, the 4 most important composers were Victor Ullmann, Pavel Haas, Hans Krasa, and Gidon Klein. They continued to write at the request of the conductors and performers in the ghetto, and their works were performed in concerts that took place in the ghetto. Ullmann wrote in an essay entitled Goethe and Ghetto, and please notice that the words Goethe and Ghetto, it's an anagram, it's the same letters. Goethe and Ghetto, he wrote, I would stress that Terezin has helped, not hindered me in my musical work, that we certainly did not sit down by the waters of Babylon and weep, and that our desire for culture was as intense as our desire for life. On October 16th, 1944, these 4 composers were deported to Auschwitz. Ullmann, Haas, and Krasa were murdered in the gas chambers 2 days later. Klein, who was the youngest, perhaps he was in better physical condition than they, I don't know. He was sent on to a work camp where he was murdered in January 1945. In more recent years, there's a story that's been circulating, and I don't know what the source of it is, but I've heard that Klein was in this work camp, and everybody knew that the war was coming to an end. It was just clear that it was so, and apparently, so the story goes, he said something to one of the German guards that he would not have dared to say 2 years earlier, let's say. And the guard just simply pulled out a gun and shot him. Now, the story of Terezin and the composers who were there and the music that was written there was largely unknown until the 1980s. I mean, I guess the survivors remembered what had happened in Terezin. Maybe some people knew, but it was not common knowledge. I mean, I went to music academy in the 1960s. I mean, we didn't know anything about it. This was not anything that we knew. Klein had a sister who survived the war. She returned to Prague and became a well-respected university professor. I think that she wanted very much to promote his music. I don't think she knew how to do it. And the Czech government, the communist government of post-World War II, was not particularly interested in making heroes out of their Jewish citizens. And mostly we didn't know about this music. And the fact that we know anything about it at all today is due largely, or maybe entirely, to a man by the name of David Bloch, Professor David Bloch, Zichrono Livracha. David was born in Seattle, and he got his PhD in music theory from the University of Washington. He made Aliyah in 1973, where he joined the faculty of the Tel Aviv University music department. The Klein Sonata came to his attention in the early 1980s. The story that he told me long afterwards was that there was a pianist by the name of Naomi Lev, and she knew that he was very interested in 20th century music. And she called him one day and she says, David, I've got this piece that I think you would be interested in. Now, my information doesn't go back any further than that. I don't know where she got the music, although it was published. So I don't know where she got it or how it came to her attention, but she thought it would be right up his alleyway. And she brought it over, and he looked through it, and he played it, and he decided it was very interesting, and that he wanted to find out more about it. And he said, on my next sabbatical, I'm going to make it my business to go visit Terezin and see what I can find out. And so he did. And as a result of that visit, this sparked his interest in what became his life's work. He founded the TMMP, the Terezin Music Memorial Project, which focused on research, concerts, workshops, master classes, Yemei Iyun, dealing with the music of Terezin. David was, I need a little help over here, Jeff. How will you translate Hama'ayan HaMitgaber? He was always involved in something new, a new project, a different composer, another venue, a different repertoire. He was constantly
A ceaseless spring of
workshop.
creativity.
Exactly. That describes him. And one of the things that most impressed me about David over the years was that if he ever heard about some work similar to his own going on in some place in the world, a concert or a workshop or anything of that nature, he was never jealous. He was not at all. And he viewed that as a sign of his own success in bringing this music to the general public. Of course, if anything was going on anywhere in the world, he knew about it because anyone who was dealing with this music naturally, eventually, sooner or later, made contact with David Bloch to find it because he was the Kohen Gadol of Terezin music. Many, many, many times I heard David say, if only I will reach retirement age, I'll retire and then I will truly be able to devote myself entirely to my main love, the music of Terezin. And sure enough, he reached he reached retirement. And I think most of us know the well-known Yiddish proverb that Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, that people make plans and the Lord laughs at us. So maybe a year or two after he went out on pension, we heard that David's got Alzheimer's. Well, David and Alzheimer's, that doesn't go together. It can't be. But that's what happened. I'm not proud of what I'm about to say next, but I found it very difficult to call him. I knew I should, but it wasn't easy. But eventually I spoke to his wife. She was a very well-known singer, Emily Berenson. And I said, should I call him? If I call him, will he know who I am? She said, absolutely. Call him, call him early in the morning before he gets tired, and he'll be happy to hear from you. So I did call him, and I said, David, how are you? And he said, well, not as well as I'd like to be. And a few years later, in 2010, he he just all the Haitakrisa klalit of all his body, and he died at the age of 71, which is really very, very sad. Part of the project, part of the Terezin Music Project was the Terezin Music Anthology. It was planned to have a series of discs recording all the works that were written in Terezin, and it would have been about 9 or 10 discs. I don't know how many came out, maybe 4, maybe another one, 5. I'm not exactly sure. I participated in some of them. Anyway, at first, I was not involved in the Terezin project because David had another pianist, and her name was Edith Krauss, and she was a survivor from Terezin. She was one of the most active pianists in Terezin, and she survived the war, and she came I think in 1949, she came to Israel. She joined the faculty of the Tel Aviv University. I did not know her, but I got to know her later because in the late 1980s, she had a minor stroke. It was minor, but she could no longer play with her left hand. And so therefore, David was on the lookout for another pianist, and he found me. I knew David before this, but not well. We had a casual acquaintance, but over the years after that, for the next 20 years, we were very close and we worked together quite a lot. I was always very grateful to David that he chose me, because I have to say, he himself was an outstanding pianist. Outstanding. I only heard him actually play a few times, 3, 4 times. But there's no question he could have done the work himself. He didn't need to ask me. And in fact, I once said to him, David, why you can do this? Why are you asking me to play in these concerts? And his answer was, well, there's so much work involved in arranging these concerts. And it is true, you have to find a venue, and you have to find a date, and you have to find the performers who are available on that date, who will be able to perform in the concert. And you've got to get the funding for it. Yes, you've got to get funding. As it happens, I will say about David, he never, never, never asked us to do anything for free, although some of us might have been willing to do it. But he had more sense than that. He would never ask us to do anything, something for without pay. So you've got to get funding. And he said, with all of that work, I just don't have the time to give to the music what it requires. And I thought about that. And I realized what he was really telling us is what he expected of us, what devotion he expected of the performers that he did choose to give to this music. Anyway, I want to say a few words about Edith Krauss because I met her um, in the late 80s, early 90s when I started to become active in this in the Terezin music project. And I knew her until her death in 2013 at the age of 100. She was a woman of great charm and nobility. I almost never heard her speak of the horrors and difficulties of life in Terezin. Rather, she emphasized how fortunate she had been to acquire there such a huge amount of performance experience. She felt that under ordinary circumstances, a young pianist like herself would never have had the opportunity to perform such a wide range of repertoire so frequently, very often repeating the same program 4 or 5 times due to popular demand. And by the way, in parentheses, I will add, it is Edith who said to me, if there was one thing that frightened her more than anything else, it was getting that letter of deportation. She could live with everything else, just not that. And the fact is, she told me that she once got a letter that she should be in her apartment the next day at a certain hour, and she was going to be deported, and they never came. Well, that's that story. I never heard her play live because when I met her, she had already stopped performing because of that stroke, which affected the use of her left hand. But I had the tremendous pleasure of hearing some of her recordings. Her playing was a great source of inspiration to me. She was the consummate musician, fully focused on the composer's musical message, totally devoid of any display of empty virtuosity. Her performances bring to my mind the statement of the great Talmudic sages, Dvarim hayotzim min halev nichnasim lalev. Words that emanate from the heart penetrate the heart. So my first introduction to the music of Terezin was in 1991 when I get a call from David Block, who, as I mentioned, I knew casually. And he tells me about this concert, which is going to take place on Yom HaShoah in 1992, Yom HaShoah, devoted to the works of Klein. And of course, I had no idea who Klein was. It didn't mean anything to me. And he says to me, I'd like you to play the Klein piano sonata. Well, I had enough sense to say to him, David, first I've got to see the music because I'm not agreeing to do it until I see the music. I wish to explain at this point that by looking at the music, just by looking at it, I cannot tell whether I think it's good music or bad music, if I will like it, if I won't like it, but I can tell by looking at it whether it's something that I can play. If it's something that I can devote myself to, the style of it, and I looked at it and I saw that I could do so, and I said yes, I will do it, and I promptly filed the music in the bookcase and forgot about it and went about my business. Well, in early 1992, around January, I guess, I suddenly remembered that in April I've got a concert with the Klein Sonata, and I started to practice, and I started to work on it. And I was amazed at what a wonderful, wonderful piece of music it is. And I remember calling him and saying, David, but this is fantastic music. And of course, I wasn't telling him anything that he didn't know. He knew it perfectly well. And so this was my introduction to the music of Terezin. And for the next 20 years or so, I was involved in many different concerts and recordings and workshops. And I did some recording for the discs that were coming out. But of course, after David died, that project, so I'm afraid, sort of came to an end. I want to tell a little story, not exactly about the Terezin composers, but it's related. In the year 2000, no, I'm sorry, in the year 2001, I became aware that at the academy where I teach, there was a package of music floating around in the academy. I guessed, without knowing, it turns out I was right, that the idea was that some composer had written some music and he didn't know what to do with it and he wanted to get it performed and he sent it to the academy and they didn't know what to do with it either. And they naturally gave it to the head of the piano department, which was not myself at that time. The music was works for piano by a composer who was recognized by Yad Vashem as one of the Hasidei Umot HaOlam, the righteous among the nations. I heard about this in 2001, but when I heard about it, this package of music had been making the rounds at the Academy for a year before that. In other words, it arrived in the year 2000. And so I picked up the telephone and I called the head of department. At that time, it was Dr. Asaf Zohar, who was no longer at the Jerusalem Academy. He went later to the Tel Aviv Academy. But at that time, he was the head of the keyboard department. And I said to him like this, I said, Asaf, I do not claim that every project which takes place at the academy that you have to turn to me. I didn't say that. However, if this music has been making its way around the academy for the past year and nobody knows what to do with it, I said, I'm a little bit surprised that you didn't call me because after all, you know that I deal with the works of the Terezin composers who were killed in the Shoah. And so it might be a natural thought process to think that the works of somebody who was recognized as a Hasid, one of the Hasidei Umot HaOlam, that maybe I would be interested to see it. And if nobody else knows what to do with it, I know perfectly well what to do with it. I want to take this music and I want to record it for the radio. Those were the days when you could still record things. The radio had a studio and you could record works and they would be broadcast. And I said, I'm going to do a concert, and that concert is going to be half of the concert will be works of the Terezin composers, and the other half will be the works of this composer who's Hasidei Umot HaOlam. And I was going on and on about all my plans and what I was going to do with this music if nobody else knew what to do with it. And when I paused for 1 second to take a breath, as one must do from time to time, he said to me, tell me, Allan, don't you think that first you should take a look at the music? And immediately, as they say in Hebrew, nafal ha'asimon, immediately the penny dropped. In other words, what he was telling me was that a lot of people had wonderful ideas of what to do with the music, but when they looked at it, it really wasn't so good. The music was not so good. And they lost interest and they passed it on to somebody else. And so the minute he said to me, don't you think that you should look at the music first? I said to him, oh, it's that bad, huh? So he says to me, well, look, I will give it to you. I'll give it to you and you can look at it and you can make your own decision. And so he gave me the music and I did look at it and it was very uninteresting. Sometimes musicians say the biggest enemy of the excellent is not the terrible. The biggest enemy is the banal. This music was very banal. It was very, very uninteresting. And I was on the verge of also being one of those who said, fine, I don't need it. It's not good. I'm not interested. And then I started to think a little bit. And I said to myself, those Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, those are the people that we love to love. But do we ever do anything for them? We don't really do anything for them. And all of a sudden, I had the opportunity of doing something for a person who maybe he wasn't such a great composer, but he was a great human being and saved people and was recognized by Yad Vashem. And I began to think to myself what I can do to actually repay him in some way. And so I began to think. First of all, there was a pianist. Some of you may know the name. There was a pianist in Jerusalem by the name of Alex Tamir. He died about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly. Alex Tamir. Actually, I think it was after the corona that he died. Um, he was a Holocaust survivor. He grew up in Vilna. He was a teenager during the Shoah. I don't exactly know where he was or what happened to him during the Shoah. I only knew that at one point he was on one of these death marches from someplace to someplace. And as we all have heard, the usual procedure was if anybody falls down, they get shot. So he fell down. He stumbled and he fell down. And the German soldier, instead of shooting him, kicked him behind a bush. And he survived and came to Israel and became a very, very well-known pianist and teacher. And he lived in an old house in Ein Karim, which had two stories. The bottom story was where he lived, and the upper floor there was a small concert hall, which is very much in use to this day. It's called the Aden Tamir Music Center. But it's a well-known hall in Jerusalem. It's a small hall. It seats about 120 people. And I thought to myself, I'll bet if I ask Alex to honor this Chasid Umot Haolam, he'll give me the use of that hall. Of course, by this time, I mean, I want you to know I was ready to pay for it myself. I didn't care whether he gave it. I would have paid for it. But I thought to myself, he'll let me do it. And I said to myself, we will have an invited audience only. They will be handpicked by me, and I will give every one of them a tidruch. Nu echomim tidruch. I will guide them they will get instructions from me how to make a big fuss over this composer and to honor him and clap vigorously. And I even thought that I could get a critic to come to the concert. This may be maybe of some surprise to you, but it shouldn't be. Israel's a very small country, and most of the performers know at least some of the critics. And I knew a critic that I could approach and ask him to come. You would have no idea how simple it is to write a review that doesn't say anything at all. I could do it myself without any problem. You write a paragraph or two about praising Allan Sternfield, who became aware of this music and arranged this concert, and how happy we were to have the composer in our midst so we could meet him. And I mean, a real critic wouldn't have any trouble at all in writing a review like this. And when I had thought it out this far, and I thought that I could really do it, I decided to call this guy. He lived in a castle in Switzerland. He was born in Austria, and he lived in Germany before the war. But during the war, he was actually in in university in Prague, and that's how he became a Chassid Umot Olam in the Prague. I'll tell the story later. Uh, but he said to me afterwards, after the war, there was no way he wouldn't go back to Germany. He said he couldn't look at them. He just couldn't look at the Germans. He settled in Switzerland, and I called him. And there is a well-known statement in the Talmud which says, Yesh kone olamo b'sha'a achat, which means that some people attain their eternal reward in one quick minute. In other words, sometimes a person does something he doesn't even know. He doesn't suspect that it's significant, and the Lord thinks otherwise. The Lord thinks because of this, you are deserving of some olam haba, some eternal reward. Well, I will believe until my dying day, I will believe that if I have any eternal reward at all, it's because of that phone call that I made to him. He was so happy. I cannot tell you how pleased he was that someone was finally undertaking to do a performance of his work. And he invited me to come visit him in Switzerland, which I promised that I would do the next time that I was in Europe. And uh, as a symbol of his gratitude to me, he sent me another package of music, this time of songs for voice and piano. And we said goodbye. And I am sorry to tell you that that is the end of the story, because he died in October of 2001. And so the concert never took place. I do not know whether he had any family, but if he did, they never were in touch with me and said, what about the concert? And I let that die a natural death too. And in some way, I hope I'm repaying something that we owe to him as Chassid Umot Haolam. I hope I'm repaying it by telling this story. I want to close by playing a short excerpt from the Klein Sonata, which I have talked about quite a bit. Not yet, Jeff, not yet, not yet. I have to say a few more words about the piece. I want to tell another little story about which took place in 1999. There was an organization which had, and for all I know still has, a yearly Kristallnacht commemoration. I think it was Emuna, but I'm not sure. But in any event, the usual structure of that commemoration was that there would be a few speeches, and there would be some kind of program of sorts, and then there was usually a singer who would sing popular, I don't exactly know what. But I did know the woman who was in charge of arranging the program, and just by chance we happened to be talking, and she happens to say that the Kristallnacht commemoration is coming up, and she hasn't yet closed with a singer. She hasn't yet finished, she hasn't finalized the program yet. So naturally, I said to her, I have an original idea for you. I think that instead of a singer, maybe once you'll look to the field of classical music. The Klein Sonata, for example, written by a composer who was in Terezin and who was killed in the Holocaust, and it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. And I will give a few, I will speak a few minutes about it. And the piece is only 10 minutes long. The whole piece. It's in 3 movements. It's only, in other words, it's not long enough to be offensive to anybody. And she thought about it, and she said yes. I don't know whether it was the wisest decision, but she said yes. She said yes. And so I did get on the stage, and I said what I was about to perform, and I gave a little background, a little history about Klein and the musical life in Terezin. And I made the point, which perhaps I should have made earlier, that these composers who wrote in Terezin when you listen to the music that they wrote there, you don't hear in the music anything of what was going on around them. The music does not reflect the terrible, terrible um situation in which these composers found themselves. In fact, I think it was a way of escape from the from reality that they wrote. And in this way, by the way, the composers, their work was different than, for example, the painters who painted in secret in Terezin, and they painted with a distinct idea of tiud of
Document.
thank you, documenting what was going on. But the composers were not that way. And then I played the sonata and Shalom al Yisrael. Well, after the concert, after the it wasn't the concert, after the tekes, the ceremony, a woman from the audience came up to me and she said to me, "You know, you are wrong when you say that this music is was not at all influenced by what was going on around them in Terezin. That's not true at all." She said to me, "This music, there is absolutely no connection between one note and the next note. This music represents anarchy in music, and that's like anarchy in the world in wartime." All right. It is truly beyond the scope of this talk for me to analyze the Klein Sonata and to explain why this music is not anarchy at all, that this music is extremely, extremely tightly constructed. But you have to know, it's not going to sound like Mozart. It's not going to sound like Beethoven. I mean, when I say it's great music, I don't mean that it sounds like music that was written 200 years ago. Also, you shouldn't say, "Oh yeah, now we know it's that nasty modern music." Excuse me, a piece that was written 82 years ago is not exactly modern. It's not modern, it's 20th century, and some of us don't particularly love 20th century music as much as they do love Mozart, but in its style, it is truly a wonderful, wonderful piece of music. And I'm going to ask Jeff to play now. This is the first movement of the Klein Sonata.
And it's about 4 minutes long.
It's about 4 minutes. Again, I say it's not long enough to be offensive. Okay. No, it's not on, Jeff. I will, while you're fixing that, I will just mention that the pianist is myself. It was, we recorded it a few days after that first concert in 1992 that I played. Okay. That's it.
Thank you, Alan.
Jeff, can I have another 2 or 3 minutes?
Of course,
I I I forgot to tell the story of the Hasidu Moto Olam. I wanted to tell his story
please.
as well. There was a an underground group um, in Prague, and when there was somebody who needed to escape and get away from the authorities, so they had a safe house in Prague, and then there was they would take them to somebody took them in a car, drove them to near the border, and then they had another group of people who got them over the border. Over the border to where? Are you ready for this? To Poland, because the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia in March 1939 and Poland in September of 1939. So for that 6 month period, if you needed to get to safety, if you could get to Poland, you were getting to safety. Anyway, our guy was the guy who had the car.
Oh,
I don't think that in Prague of 1939, I don't think there were that many cars on the streets. But he was the one who had the car. His name was Dr. Joachim von Zetwitz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Or to give him his correct title, he was actually Count Joachim von Zetwitz because he was a count in the Austrian nobility, and he was the one who had the car. So thank you. That's it.
Alan, thank you so much for this. Those of us that will be traveling together with you and I to Prague and Vienna and Budapest this summer will be together in Terezin. And
Mhm.
part of what we heard today from you and the music that we just heard will be the kind of soundtrack of that experience as we're together. And those that were with us in Terezin in 2022, no doubt found great meaning in what you said, as did we all. I'm so glad that we had this opportunity, and I hope we'll have more opportunities to gather together the Bogre Agnon tours, for ongoing, continuing education, as we say, and even more important for the ongoing Chevreschaft of the friendship of being able to see each other and to learn together and to learn from each other. And those of you that are just meeting Alan for the first time, if you'll be with us in one of the upcoming trips, you're in for a treat to be able to travel with him and with each other. And I think this is a demonstration of just the wonderful, wonderful people and the talents we're able to gather together for what we do. So thank you all. Nice to see you all again,
Thank
and looking
you.
forward to meeting some of you in person. And if anybody has any questions, you're welcome. I'm sure Alan will be happy to stay on the Zoom
Yeah,
to answer
if
any
I know the
questions,
answers,
either
okay.
either in the chat or to open your microphone. But of course, we understand people have to move on with their evenings or their days. So thank you all very much.
Just
Thank
want
you.
to say hello to everybody from the Portugal trip. Can you hear me?
Hey,
Yeah.
Hi,
Shalom.
Alan.
So hi, Rita.
I
Hello, how
just
are you?
I just got back from giving a tour in Hebrew about our Jewish museum to our Ashkelon teenagers that came to
Mm,
visit from Diller. So it's been a wonderful time to connect to Israel in this way, and to you. You played beautifully to see Jeff, Rabbi Jeff, Arlene, who am I? Dorothy, Fabia,
Yes.
and who else was from on our trip? I don't remember. And Dorothy, yes. So good. May you all have a Chag Sameach and see you in Israel.
Amen.
Thanks so much,
You
Rita.
too. Thank you.
good.
I have a
Well,
question for
I have one
Alan.
question.
Hi, Judy.
Wait, first
Shalom.
Judy Mzel had a question first, and then Dorothy.
First, I want to thank you for whetting my appetite by presenting such a wonderful lecture. And
Thank you.
really,
Thank you very much.
I never knew about the music from Terezin. I've heard of other composers that Yaakov Fischer. You've spoken to Yaakov about what he does,
I
music.
don't know. I'm a little bit, not much. That's the truth.
So I
Yeah,
was curious to know whether this piece you think was inspired by previous composers.
certainly. Certainly. By the way, I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned, this sonata was written in Terezin in 1943. Just you should know. Of course, naturally.
Did
I
you
think
hear anything specifically of any because to me it was a foreboding. It had a sadness, even though it was it had a lot of
Okay,
tempo to it.
can
But
be.
yeah.
There is no reason why a piece of music should not have a character, and that character could be foreboding or happy or sad or whatever. But certainly, I think it's a very, very excellent example of mid 20th century piano music. That musical language. I don't hear anything of Terezin in there, unless you say foreboding is could be, but I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
so I certainly think that he was influenced by other composers. But the truth is, you have to know that he was largely, almost totally self-taught,
Mm.
because just when he was on the verge of entering the university in the very late 1930s, then they all of a sudden the universities were closed to Jews, and he
Wow.
was not able. So most of what he did is it's heartbreaking to think what would have become of him
Yeah.
if he had survived and become really realized. I mean, this music, it's just terrific. It really is.
I
And
think there are probably very few pianists who've taken on this piece,
there are not that many.
right?
There are not that many. And even I, if you can say that I'm you know, I'm Mishugala Davar, and I want, you know, it's not a piece that I can give, that I could give the vast majority of my students. I couldn't.
Right.
It's not easy to
Oh,
play, and I just, you know, I couldn't.
Mm.
But you know, I did my little part to the extent that I could. Yes, yes.
thank you.
Just since Judy will be joining us in Prague this summer. She's new to
Hmm.
our group, so welcome. So Dorothy, you had a question.
Yeah, it follows a little bit the previous question. I would have wanted, if possible, Alan to do another hour on that piece and take it apart and explain why this, why that, why he thinks that it is this, and he doesn't agree with that lady who told him it was chaotic. You know, carry on that piece of music specifically.
I would love to do it, but I have to do it with a piano and not on Zoom. But if we can, are you coming to Prague? If we can get a room with a piano
No, I've
and we
done
can sit
Prague.
down for a half
I've
an hour,
been
it
to
won't be
Prague
difficult
so
at all
many
to show you.
times.
Huh?
Well, we could do it in Jerusalem.
Oh, yes, we can. Of course, we can.
Well, you'll
But
also be
I don't
together.
think we can do it in this framework.
The two of you will be together with us in Provence, but
Oh, in
Yeah, but
Provence.
we
this is
might
Okay.
not a
focus on other
problem.
things there. But,
Hi,
That's what I was
it's not a
hoping.
Hello,
problem
shalom,
at
Arlene.
all.
Yeah, no, that's what I was hoping. And Alan, the
Hi.
complexity of that piece was overwhelming, and how you were able to play it with such strength and confidence. It just blew me away.
The complexity is
Yes, I
overwhelming
agree.
when you don't know it or when you're hearing it for the first time. And if I will sit down and take it apart and then put it back together again, you'll suddenly say, gee, it's kind of just like what Beethoven used to do.
No, do
And it
it,
doesn't sound like
please,
Beethoven. It's not
please.
supposed to sound like Beethoven.
Alan, can you, for people that want to hear the whole piece, this was just one of three movements. For people that
Yes.
want the whole thing, where is the recording available?
I think we need to hear it in person, though, Jeff.
Yes,
Okay.
but
I think we need to have.
not everyone will be able to gather in person with Alan. Where could someone hear the recording?
Look, I don't know, because I'm ignorant, and because some of these things don't interest me. I did not look on YouTube to see who else
Ah.
is. I'm not the only pianist who
But
plays this.
your recordings are not
But
commercially available.
But they might be. The disco. This is on the Terezin
Oh,
Memorial.
okay.
So I don't know whether, if you go into a disc store, if you can find it or not. I
Mhm.
really don't know.
But someone that
Because in
turned
that
to you
respect,
would
I'm
be able to.
a very poor
Yeah.
presenter of my own music. But
But if we a person who turned to you would be able to get access to the
to me, yes.
recordings. Yes, okay.
To me, yes.
We,
I can
we know how
send
to
it.
reach Allan Sternfield, or you can reach him, of
Yeah,
course, through me.
that's not an insurmountable problem.
Yes, okay.
Yes. In
Okay,
fact,
listen.
you know, Jeff, I sent you another piece, and
Yes.
before I sent it to you, you said to me, "Well, can you find it on YouTube?" So I did look on YouTube,
Mm.
And I found a few performances, and that's why I sent you my
Your own
performance, because I
performance.
thought mine was better. Pardon me, all that, but that's
Well, we'll be happy to pat you on the back as well.
yeah.
Unless maybe there's just one last question. I think we'll be
Okay.
signing off. So again, thank you all so much. Looking forward to seeing many of you on the two upcoming trips. And Allan, thank you so, so much for this. And we're looking forward to traveling with you and
Thank you.
continuing the conversation on the
Thank you for the
bus, or if we
opportunity.
can swing it, perhaps over a piano. But as the nature